So, Glenn, what bothers me is not so much what Zelensky is doing. There's a lot of tyranny around the world. I don't brood on it. But the fact that A, we're paying for it, and B, our leaders are defending it. I think every American should be upset about that.
I think in general, Americans should be very skeptical when the U.S. government says we're going to fight in wars on the other side of the world. We're sending tens of billions of dollars in military aid in order to spread democracy. The U.S. government actually doesn't care about spreading democracy. Many of its closest allies in the world always have been and still are some of the world's most despotic regimes, like in Saudi Arabia, Egypt.
Right.
All the U.S. government cares about is that a government serve U.S. interests, not whether it's democratic or not. But if you want to believe the fairy tale that the U.S. government goes to war to spread democracy, Ukraine is not the place for you. You mentioned this argument, well, Zelensky's in war, he has to curb liberty. Go back to 2021, a year before Russia invaded, and you can find articles, just Google it, where he shut down opposition television stations. He's now shut down opposition parties. Every hallmark of what a despot and tyrant, not a Democrat, does is shaping the Zelensky government, and that was true well before Russia invaded.
I wonder, I mean, two things. One, how can Republicans on the Hill continue to defend this? And B, what's it really about? Because I think you're right. Our foreign policy is almost always about defending our interests. I think it should be, actually. But I don't see our critical interests at stake here. So I'm not, what is this about?
Right. So I think the first point is, if the U.S. government were honest, and they should be, they would get rid of this whole script about, oh, we have to go and defend democracy. That's a fairy tale that tries to get Americans to feel better about the fact that we're involved in many, many countries all over the world. That's not the real reason. The only reason is to do it for vital U.S. interests. The line in Washington for decades was the U.S. has no vital interest in Ukraine. That was Obama's view. That was the bipartisan view. Why did that change? The only reason is because we saw an opportunity to trap Russia inside Ukraine, all based on the view that Russia is our enemy, something only Democrats should believe because they think Russia is to blame for the 2016 election and Hillary's victory. But why would Republicans want confrontation with Russia? What Americans does that benefit besides arms manufacturers?
Well, that's a really good question, and I haven't quite unraveled it. It seems pretty clear that the Biden administration baited Russia into this invasion. You had the Vice President of the United States in Western Europe days before telling Zelensky to join NATO, which of course they knew was a red line. They wanted this invasion. That's my view. I think it's very obvious. You think this was all about preparing for a war with Russia?
If you think that Russia is a grave enemy of the United States, then it makes sense to try and lure them into a war that they can't win, like we got lured into one with Afghanistan for 20 years, or we lured the Soviet Union into a war with Afghanistan back in the 70s, because it does deplete your enemy. The question is, why should Russia be seen as our enemy? Both Obama and Trump said there's no reason to see Russia that way. It has 1/15 the size of our military budget. It's not threatening American borders. Why are we so obsessed with spending tens of millions of dollars to weaken Russia, which we could be using here at home to benefit the lives of American citizens, when Russia's not doing anything to the United States, unless you're a crazy resistance person who believes they're the reason Donald Trump won? But if you don't believe that, what is the rationale for this? There is none.
I know. And as usual, they've hijacked the best instincts of Americans, their compassion, and turned that against them. Glenn Greenwald, great to see you tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Tucker.